Hey, this is Scott Allen Miller here on the Sam IT channel on YouTube. And today I want to talk about faxing because this is a topic that comes up rather a lot, mostly around HIPAA compliance and security, but it's worth talking about because people tend to have a lot of security concerns around email for some social reason, but they don't tend to have it around traditional telephones and faxing. And this is odd because traditional telephones, faxing, and texting are some of the least secure technologies that we have. So why are we so happy using these completely insecure technologies when email, which while not super secure by default, is actually decently secure, we tend to panic about? Partly this is just people are afraid of technology. To some degree we can kind of accept that, but we want to talk about faxing because faxing is specifically probably the least secure thing we can do short of putting information directly onto a bulletin board or a billboard. Right? So faxing, first of all, there are a whole bunch of components to it, and this is important, right? You're dealing with, you have to have physical paper at the beginning. Of course, you can digitize some of these processes, but all of these things are trying to mitigate problems of faxing, right? If you just skipped the faxing part, all this would be fine. So we start with the physical component. We have to have information in paper, and then we have to put it into a fax machine, which then has to be monitored, and then we have to do something with that source material, which is inherently insecure. So we have this physical insecurity issue right from the beginning. Now, of course, you can say email is not secure at the very beginning, but we have very solid systems for securing that, like locking your computer or encrypting your hard drive or destroying it really easily. Destroying paper is much harder to do. So we start off inherently insecure. We then send this signal over a traditional phone line. And here, faxing is subject to the same insecurities that traditional phone calls are. And that is that this is just an analog signal. There's no encryption, there's no security, and it's a set circuit throughout its path. That means that any technology can grab this signal. It's completely trivial. You can tap the lines inside your office. There's nothing to stop you. I mean, people might stop you from doing it, but it's really, really easy to do, and it doesn't interrupt the signal like some other technologies would. Fiber, for example, it's almost impossible to tap a line. Not impossible, just very difficult. But tapping a traditional phone line is trivially easy and doesn't require physical access to it. You can do it from some distance away. That makes every inch of the path that your signal goes subject to high levels of security risk. You can catch, in most businesses, you will have a wiring closet, possibly one shared with other businesses in a large building, where completely unencrypted fax and telephone calls will go through and be shared. Anybody with access to that closet doesn't even need the complication of tapping your line by having some kind of special equipment. They just have the wires there. They can plug in a fax machine or a phone or whatever and grab things off the line that way. So easy to do. It's actually hard to explain how simple this is. It's so trivial to hijack the information coming across fax or phones. Then once it goes public, you still have physical phone lines outside your building. Now, if you're lucky, you have modern phone lines and you're not actually faxing. You're actually going over VoIP or FOIP and just don't know it. In those cases, you get some security. But if that's not happening, if you're doing real fax over analog lines or real calls over analog lines, guess what? They're just copper going outside, and anybody with any notion that they want to get to your information can do so. And, this is important, they can do it without touching the lines. They can do it from some distance away, or at least without tapping the lines. They don't have to do physical damage. So this is really, really easy to do, and you can just imagine how simple it is to get a little device, a little battery, put it somewhere down the street where no one can identify who they're looking for. They can identify you because your circuit is stable. They know where your calls and your faxes are going to go, so they can go down the street and tap you there, or they can tap you in the building, or they can tap you in your office. They have so many choices depending on what your physical access is like, and that's just on your side. All of that, they have so many options to get your information, and they can fire it off wirelessly with no effort at all over like Wi-Fi. They can encrypt it, so it's very hard to know who they're after because their side's secure even if your side is not. So they have more protections than you do. then they can do it from some distance away. If they were to get caught, they just walk away. There's nothing to tie them to it. But if you have a problem, you're stuck because you have a switch circuit with no security. Then, of course, you always have the problem that the telecommunications providers themselves may or may not be secure. We'll trust them because we kind of have to. But sending traditional phone calls through your telephone provider is still the least secure way. You have the least control, but it's trivial. We generally trust the telecom. Then we have problems with the other side. The person who's receiving it has all the same issues, right? So you can tap things on their side anywhere. And then we have the physical printing problem. Now, this is not inherent to faxing because you could fax to an email box somewhere or something and fix some of these problems. But basically, you always have this issue, and that is when the fax is received, you need to, you have no verification of where it's going. It just goes wherever you typed in. If you put in the wrong phone number, it just goes there, right? It does, well, I mean, not if the phone number is invalid, but if the phone number is valid, they're just getting the fax. There's absolutely no authentication where the person on the other side says, hey, this is so-and-so, and you say, is this the person who's supposed to get the fax? Yes. Are you standing there? Yes. You can, of course, work around it by doing a phone call or texting or email additionally to the fax, but the fax itself has zero authentication built in, and once you've hit send, it's gone. It's too late. You can't stop it. So even if you figure out, hey, I'm sending you a fax now, okay, all right, I hit send, it's sending, but it's not receiving, oh, I sent it to the wrong place. You'll never know, right? Unless you do it through some out-of-band thing, but it's already too late. Someone else has it. Then, if that person is there receiving the fax, okay, that probably works. But you don't know where that fax machine is. It might be in public. It might be printing out and just letting them drop on the floor, and anyone can walk by and get them. You don't know. Now, of course, we can say these things about email. You don't know. Maybe this email goes to a public mailbox, and maybe it prints automatically and does weird things. It displays it on a bulletin board somewhere. Sure, but those are all things that someone would have to go really out of their way to do to make email insecure. It's a contrived circumstance. It's not natural. With faxing, it's not contrived. It's the normal situation. You don't know where the faxes are going to go. You don't know if someone's standing there to receive it. You don't know if the person who's going to receive it is the person you're sending it to, because you're sending to a device, not to a person. This is an inherent difference, and it's insecure by design, right? Phone numbers are not an identifier of a person. They are an identifier of a device, kind of an identifier of a location. So when you send or make a call to a telephone number, you are not doing it to a person, no matter what you feel you are doing. When you're doing email, it's different. You have a specific person whose identity is tied to that email, rather than a physical location, place, or a device. So you can contrive email to be as bad as faxing in those ways, but by its nature, it's not designed to be. These are big factors. And then, of course, this all adds up to a giant picture of faxing is simply the least secure thing we can do, followed shortly by traditional phone calls over the analog network. And none of this takes into account the S7 signaling system, the network, the PSTN, the public switch telephone network technology itself, which is very old and itself is insecure. So there's all this potential for hacking that, in addition to faxing and voice calls themselves being insecure on their own. So these layers just add up and add up and add up. So what's amazing is that anyone is willing to put any kind of information onto fax or voice calls. It's in reality, it's highly irresponsible. We are decades past the point where these are acceptable technologies for any type of private communications. Public communications, advertisements, menus, all that's fine. Weird, but fine from a security standpoint. But private information is not at all acceptable to put over these forms. We have things like email, which, while not perfect, is dramatically more secure out of the gate. You have the worst configured emails, unless you go out of your way to make them insecure, are much more secure than fax, and trivial standard configurations take it to a whole nother level. And we can talk about that in another video. The point of this one is to discuss why faxing is the most dramatically insecure and irresponsible communications method that you can reasonably implement. Thanks for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe. Of course, this topic is specifically going to be controversial, especially if you're in the HIPAA space, and I will admit, HIPAA auditors will often overlook your security gaps if you do it because of fax. This does not mean fax is secure. It doesn't suggest that fax is secure. It's a standard bit of kind of corruption that is widely accepted within the auditor space to simply give a pass to people who are exposing patient data in this way. I don't know why that's acceptable, and it is unique to HIPAA. But if you work in the medical space and your goal is not to be secure, but to pass an audit regardless of how insecure you are, then fax may play a reasonable role in allowing that to happen. All right. Thanks for joining me, and we will talk more about security, faxing, communications, and other technologies in the future.